Hello, good morning. Welcome back again to our channel. It's me, Teacher A. Welcome again to another amazing learning journey. We are done with the second quarter of our current school year 2021-2022. Now we're down at the beginning of our third quarter in English 8. For this particular module, we'll be focusing on the examining biases for or against made by the author. Biases can be if you like it, if you agree with it, or you disagree with it. Now, let's take a look on the concept of bias. A teenager would mean bias when it comes on a certain K-pop group. Who's your bias in BTS? For me, it's Jungkook. Yeah, I personally like Jungkook in this one. It means that will be your bias. Other students can be biased like V, or it can be Jimin, RM, or any of the members of the BTS. Or if you don't like BTS, you can either choose another K-pop group or a P-pop, like in the growing industry in the Philippines. You can choose either of the members who would you like to support. Another one would be we have here Mr. Mike Enriquez of 24 Horas, a notable and experienced radio and TV news anchor. Now, what was the familiar line that we always hear from Mr. Mike Enriquez during his program with Mel Tiangco in the 24 Horas? They kept on saying, walang kinikilingan, walang pinoprotektahan, serbisyong totoo lamang. Okay, based on that particular phrase, news is not biased according to them. Therefore, they don't have an agree or a disagree process or a concept that they really wanted to believe in. They believe in fact. Now, according to the nuggets of learning that we have here, an important part of evaluating an author's ethos is identifying the author's bias. Bias is any opinion that influences a person's thoughts, feelings, or actions. A person can be biased against something or have a bias for something. An author's bias is any opinion or prejudice that affects the author's writing and prevents the author from being completely neutral about the topic or issue about which she or he is writing. Now, an author can be biased based on his opinion. It can be influenced by his thoughts, feelings, or actions. That's why, as a reader, as an audience, you should always know how to identify the biases made by the author. Now, there is some definition of bias that we can consider. The first one would be a prejudice against something an author is writing about. Okay, the term would be against. The author can be against a particular individual, a particular concept. He or she tried to use or select words included in his or her writing that attack that particular person negatively. Another one would be in contrast. In the first definition, we have favoritism for something an author is writing about. The first statement is about telling negatively or attacking the person by an author. Now, the second one would be agreeing with that particular individual. The author can sugarcoat things, can say positively, or can state any positive things about that person. The next one would be an author letting feelings or emotions cloud his her objectivity about something he or she is writing about. For this part, the emotions, the past experiences, the perspective of that particular author affected the objectivity of a particular writing. He or she let or her his feelings or emotions entangled in the particular topic. It is na-overlap siya. Parang gonna somehow mixed with the objectivity. Now, an important skill of critical reading is the ability to detect an author's bias. That's correct. Critical reading is different from reading alone. Reading alone is understanding the character, the plot, the conclusion, the theme. But critical reading, it involves how a person can detect an author's bias. You can identify if the author is pro or cons. You can identify if the author if it is against or had this so-called favoritism. The reason for this is to avoid invalidation of an author's claim. That's correct. We should always validate whatever we hear, whatever we read, whatever we see in the pages of anyone's uh, output. That would be, we can avoid the invalidation of an author's claim. We cannot easily be provoked to his or her own opinion. We can identify, ay, mali ang kanyang sinasabi. We can identify, ay, tama ang kanyang sinasabi. We should always be careful on what we read. We should always identify if the author is biased. May kinakampihan ba siya or wala? Now, these are the several ways to detect an author's possible bias and prejudice. For an example, number one, the author uses inflammatory language in the most extreme cases, racial epithets and slurs. Inflammatory language means a kind of hurtful words that attacks or something that discriminates. Like in the most extreme cases, like racial, they can say that Black Americans are most likely to be criminals. That would be bias. Kasi sinasabi mo na yung mga Black Americans ay may posibilidad na mas maging criminal sila. You are being biased because of the color. Okay? We can always say that in Asia, Filipinos are tend to be domestic helper. You are trying to generalizing that all Filipinos tend to be a domestic helper. They cannot be in another profession. That would be bias, okay? Number two would be the author consistently makes claims whose larger purpose is to elevate one social, ethnic, national, religious, or gender group as compared to another or all others. Okay. For number two, the author is being biased because they claim whose larger purpose is to elevate. Parang sinasabing, oh, let's take it in the political side. Those who are supporting BBM and Sara Duterte opposes the stand of Leni Robredo and Kiko Pangilinan. That would be author's bias. They try to make claims in a larger purpose. Parang sinasabi nila, oh, this will be the larger purpose. These people can be more consistent, more escalated in terms of social status comparing to another individual. You tend to make that in terms of national, religious, or gender group, or even in the political concepts. Number three would be the author consciously presents evidence that serves to tell only one side of an event or issue, purposely withholding or ignoring information that may shed the opposing view in a more positive light. In number three, this will be the target stated by Mike Enriquez in 24 Oras na walang kinikilingan, walang pinoprotektahan. It means an author can be biased whenever that they don't want to present evidences in another side. As an individual, as a writer, you should always see the two sides of a coin. It's not only the one-sided appeal. You should always provide information. You should always provide the issue, the event on the other side of the fence as well. You should be balanced. You should be fair. That's why you tend to be biased because you only provide the evidence of one side only. For number four, we have the author manufactures, falsifies, and or dishonestly cites evidence in order to present his or her case in a more positive light. This will be the most common problem right now in the political world or even in any sector that we are familiar with. I don't want to tell anything about this, okay? I'm not a political person in the first place, okay? There are some authors to make their